Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. Today's video is sort of a quirky one, but kind of got to me, so I'm going to share this with you. So let's talk today about this so-called age-defying life hack that is probably not going to work for you because you're watching this YouTube channel. A lot of you who are longtime watchers of this channel, and if you're new to this channel, please subscribe and hang around, but my long-term viewers, you know that one of my sick guilty pleasures are reading the tabloids and doing things like watching 90 Day Fiancé. It's kind of my busman's holiday from all of this narcissism stuff. So in my little daily tabloid crawl, I'm reading one of these tabloids and I come across a headline that says, Harvard longevity researcher who is 53 years old has taken his age back by a decade using 4 tricks. And they showed a picture of him, and the so-called current picture looks almost boy-like compared to the one from his 40s. Now listen, I'm 57, and I thought, more from a physical perspective, how can I take 10 years off of this old body that is starting to feel more and more like a car with about 300,000 miles on it? Like, okay, so I read the article. Now, the first tip of these age-defying hack tips was to run 3 times a week, which I interpreted to really mean exercise aerobically somewhat vigorously a few times a week. Okay, so I was like, I got it. No newsflash there. Great, sure. The second one is to drink matcha green tea twice a day. He, Mr. Harvard, has his made for him by a celebrity chef, whatever the hell that means. And I believe like this matcha green tea stuff is almost like this powdery, like they grind up the green tea leaves. So it's this green powdery stuff that gets mixed with water. And it almost looks more like green juice. Now, what we know is green tea is a great source of antioxidants. I was happy when I read that. I don't do the whole matcha celebrity thing, but sort of Dr. Ramani story, since 2008, I was in Japan. I went to go climb Mount Fuji. Every day since that day, for 15 years without exception, I have a large mug of green tea upon waking. Every day, come hell or high water. I carry little tea bags with me when I travel, so I'm never without. Now, I'm not sure it has helped, but I kind of hope it offsets all of the running that I am not doing. So I'm like, okay, green tea, got that one. He then says that he takes some other supplements that contain some thing that is in foods like red wine and chocolate. Kind of seems more fun to eat the chocolate, so I do that. The research on all that is unclear, so let's just call his whole red wine chocolate pill a placebo effect. But here comes tip number 4. If you do this, you can take 10 years off of your life. Ready for it? Here it comes. Reduce the stress in your life and avoid jerks, because being irritated by toxic, jerky people can drop your life expectancy. Thank you, Mr. Harvard Benjamin Button. He does this by setting aside quiet time each day to manage the stress. Okay, I get that. And then he avoids working with jerks. All right. So you and I both know what he means by jerks. Jerk is code for narcissistic person. Someone who is entitled and demanding and arrogant and has poor boundaries and is invalidating and demanding and manipulative and takes advantage of you and rages and lacks empathy and is egocentric. You know the drill. Now, at some level, I got to tell you, he's not wrong. I don't disagree. I've been saying since some of my earlier books that exposure to narcissistic people pretty much almost qualifies as a public health issue and really is doing harm to all of our health and to the population at large. I would actually say that consistent and deep exposure to narcissistic, antagonistic, toxic people is just as harmful as many other toxic processes like a sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy diet, hell, maybe even smoking. The chronic stress over months, years, lifetimes created by these relationships, not just when you're having to tangle with narcissistic people, but even in your so-called quiet moments, the anticipation of the next argument for even the smallest thing, the next gaslighting episode, having to sit through a good day, wondering when the next bad one was going to come. You know the drill. It's not just the bad days that make narcissistic relationships stressful. It's the total burden of the up, down, and all around of it. But this idea of just cut them out and don't deal with them, really? Because if there's only one thing I know, most of us cannot cut them all out. Leaving a job is typically not an option. Toxic colleagues and bosses are not, doesn't matter, can't just leave the job. Ending a relationship, distancing from a family, also not an option for a lot of people. So what then? If we have these problems, we're just supposed to die sooner? Do you age faster? What we do know about stress would argue that yes, you would. Chronic stress at this level impacts stuff like the length of your telomeres, which is in essence biological aging. Now listen, there is a luxury to be able to just wave your hand and say, out, out, all of you narcissistic and toxic people. It's time for me to drink my green tea after I take my run. Now, most folks have complex ties in their lives. They have one narcissistic parent, one not narcissistic parent, or they want to have their kids to have grandparents, or they have marriage and interlinked finances, or they have concerns about custody, or they're 25 to 30 years into a job where you'll get a pension in a few years, or an adult child who is narcissistic and you don't want to quit your own kid. A best friend that you've known forever. The list goes on. And even if you just decided to go scorched earth and remove all toxic people from your life, you may find that the fallout of doing that, the grief, the loss, the other practical and secondary and collateral losses are also taking a toll on you. The challenge of narcissistic relationships is that it is not that simple. And sure, if there are lower stakes toxic relationships that you can remove from your life, by all means do it right away. But it's not always that simple. And you could run marathons and consume gallons of green tea, but none of it will have the impact of addressing these toxic relationships. But unlike the running and the matcha, these relationships are something you have less control over. A key path forward is to be in these relationships differently. If you're going to stay, understand the architecture of a narcissistic relationship, the never-ending mess, the don't engage, don't personalize, it doesn't change, stick to the weather as a conversation, foster other connections, recognize that the good days won't last, and hold onto your reality and validate your own experience. Recognize that you can't count on the narcissistic person, that you will have to take care of important things yourself, and that they will feel entitled to your help while you can expect little from them. Or if you do, you will be reminded of it forever. So yes, these relationships, these narcissistic, toxic relationships, and it's not just working with the jerks, it's living with them, it's breaking bread with them, they're aging us. But you can manage them better and try and distance from the ones you can't. But when a very privileged, fancy Harvard doctorate type, who likely has the power, the money, and the ability to distance from this situation, makes it sound as though it's some age-defying revelation to do that, it's a reminder that most folks out there don't recognize how complicated a mess narcissistic relationships are. And just to throw this in as a bonus, he also suggested that if we meditate like 20 to 22 hours per week, we could actually shave 20 years off of our life and think like a 25-year-old. First, if I had 22 hours a week to meditate, by definition, that means I've got a lot of time and probably money and not trying to juggle the 1,000 things that people like me do. So I would be less stressed just because I've got more time. And frankly, my brain works far better now than it did at 25. Youth may be vitality, but age is wisdom, especially when it comes to understanding toxic relationships. So everybody, keep drinking that matcha. Let me know how it works out for you. Thanks again.